looking this morning, again, at chapter 20 of 1 Samuel. But before we get there, there is a proverb, Proverbs 18, verse 24, that says, "A man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." I'm not sure I understand the first part of that verse. I don't know that I've had too many friends. I love the friends that I have, but apparently there's a danger in having too many friends. But the important thing is there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. A brother. I always wanted a brother growing up. Didn't get one. My dad had 4 brothers, and I just loved to see how they interacted. Of course, it would have been interesting to have been there when they were children, but I just thought, wow, I wished I could have the same kind of a thing. Now, I've got 2 sisters, one that I grew up with, one that wasn't born until I went to college, so it took a little longer to learn and get to know her. But I'm thankful for my sisters, but I just always thought life would be complete if I could just have had a brother. When I look at young brothers and how they treat each other, I'm thankful for the younger brother I never had for how I would have treated him. So his life, if there was to be such a person, would be much, much better off. In the family of God, I am thankful that I have so many brothers and sisters, of course, but so many brothers that more than make up for not having a biological brother. More than anything else, though, I'm thankful for the friend who sticks closer than a brother. My friend, Jesus the Christ. Amen? We want to talk about that friend, but talking about friendships. There's a legendary one we look at this morning, in particular in chapter 20, but we're also going to go back to some other verses here in 1 Samuel. But a legendary friendship between 2 men, David and Jonathan. And we really, in today's terminology, could say they really were best buds. They were absolutely best of friends. A friendship that would be very severely tested in the fact that Jonathan was King Saul's son. He was heir to the throne, at least apparently. And of course, we know from what we study in 1 Samuel in particular that King Saul became a sworn enemy to David, who would succeed him as a king. And so it put Jonathan in an extremely difficult situation. Last week we looked at David and Goliath, famous story that many, many people know about. David and Jonathan became best of friends right after David had killed Goliath, the giant. If you go back to chapter 18, we'll look at a few verses there. If you go back to chapter 18, verse 1, it says, "Now it came about when he had finished speaking to Saul, when David had finished speaking to Saul, it says that the soul," this is interesting, "the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as himself." That's an amazing friendship. So we might say that these 2 men became soulmates, and even as I say that, I don't want to misconstrue anything, nothing inappropriate about it, but they just were knit together. A most amazing kind of friendship. If you look down to verse 3 here, also in chapter 18, it says, "Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself." So they had a covenant friendship. Now, right here, we don't know the specifics. What was the covenant that Jonathan made with David? We don't know according to this. We do learn more details elsewhere in our studies. But I really believe a covenant here must mean a solemn promise to seek the absolute best good of the other. And so to swear to David, Jonathan swearing to David, "I will look out for the best good in your life," a solemn promise that he would make for him. Again, a covenant that would be very severely tested. Then in verse 4 it says, "Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, including his sword and his bow and his belt. As we said, Jonathan was heir to the throne. Dad was in charge, so he's kind of the Prince Charles, I guess we'd say today. So he was heir to the throne, and here he is in royalty, taking off the robe, no doubt a symbol of royalty, taking off the robe, taking off his armor, and giving it to David. So we have a king, a future king, who is stripping himself of his privileges, which reminds me of another king who's done the same thing. Philippians 2, 6 and 7 speaks of Jesus being in the form of God, but not counting equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant. So Jonathan is a type of Christ, removing himself of the privilege that he had, deferring to this very, very good friend, this covenant friend that he had. So now let's flip back to chapter 20, and let's take a look at the first 3 verses. There's a lot of story that we're not bringing in as we read these verses. I got to tell you up front, it's a little challenging to try to share what we're going to look at here, but bear with me, and hopefully you can, on your own, go back and piece together some of the verses, like in chapter 19, that we're not reading here. But as we pick up in verse 1, it says, David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said to Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my iniquity? And what is my sin before your father that he's seeking my life?" And he said to him, "Far from it. You shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing, either great or small, without disclosing it to me. So why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." Yet David vowed again, saying, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your sight." And he has said, "Do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is hardly a step between me and death." Favor of God has departed from King Saul. The Spirit of God has left King Saul. The Spirit of God is upon David. David's been anointed king to take the place of King Saul. Saul has become very jealous. When I think of the story of David and Goliath, that probably had a huge impact on Saul. And so he sees God's favor and God's hand upon him, and he knows his situation. And I think that he's just very, very jealous of him. He knows what God's going to do in raising David up. And so out of sheer hatred for him, he's determined that he is going to kill David. Jonathan, his son, he said, "Well, Dad tells me everything. There's no secrets with my dad. If my dad was going to kill you, I would know about it." Apparently, David is a little more insightful and knowledgeable. He says, "Yeah, but your dad knows. He knows the friendship that we have. And so he's withholding from you the real intention that he is bent on killing me." And so David says, "There's hardly a step between me and death." Now that's an interesting statement, is it? So my life's hanging in the balance. There's hardly a step between me and death, and I think there's probably an application, not to belabor this point too much, but that's how we all live life. There's hardly a step between us and death. Life's uncertain. So we know that, but David's situation is especially precarious. So verse 4 says, Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." Now, the thing that we're focusing on here today is characteristics of friendship, and I want you to especially notice that verse. This is the quality of a true friend. Whatever you say, as a committed covenant friend, whatever you say, I will do that for you. So again, you see what an amazing friend Jonathan is to David. Verses 5 and 6, David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I ought to sit down to eat with the king, but let me go that I may hide myself in the field until the third evening. And if your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, because it is the yearly sacrifice there for the whole family." Just to get a little bit of background to appreciate what we're reading there, it was a special annual banquet that was to be held that would take place for 3 days. And so David is supposed to be there. He's an honored guest. He's an expected guest. But David knows what Saul is about. He knows that he's trying to kill him, so he's going to lay low during this particular time. And he says to Jonathan, his covenant friend, "Here's the excuse that I want you to give to your dad." So now jump down to verse 10 to 13. David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" Concerning the fact that he's not going to be at that banquet. Jonathan said to David, "Come and let us go out into the field." So both of them went out to the field. And Jonathan said to David, "The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or the third day, behold, if there is good feeling toward David, shall I not then send to you and make it known to you? If it please my father to do you harm, may the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not make it known to you and send you away, that you may go in safety. And may the Lord be with you as he has been with my father." So to try to understand the scenario, David is not going to be at this 3-day banquet. And so Jonathan will be there, and he wants to know from Jonathan, "How's your dad feel about me?" And so how are we going to figure out making this known to me? Jump down to verses 18 to 22. Jonathan said to him, "Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. When you have stayed for 3 days, you shall go down quickly and come to the place where you hid yourself on that eventful day, and you shall remain by the stone Azel. And I will shoot 3 arrows to the side as though I shot at a target. And behold, I will send the lad saying, 'Go find the arrows.' If I specifically say to the lad, 'Behold, the arrows are on the side of you, get them, then come, for there is safety for you and no harm as the Lord lives.' But if I say to the youth, 'Behold, the arrows are beyond you, go, for the Lord has sent you away. As for the agreement of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever.'" So if you understand the situation here, David's going into hiding. Jonathan's going to know exactly how his dad, King Saul, feels about things. And so he's going to indicate to David how it really is. So the way it's going to be done is David's going to be in hiding. They're going to go out to do a little target practicing with bow and arrow. And so 3 arrows will be shot by Jonathan. And if they land to the side of this target, it's all right. He'll say to this young boy that goes with him, "That'll be a sign to David, Dad feels okay about you. It's safe. But if I say to that young man, 'The arrows are beyond you,' those words will indicate to you that my dad is bent on killing you." And so this will be the sign, the prearranged sign concerning those arrows. Verses 24 to 29 that we'll not read again. I think this is a great chapter for you to study on your own. But we know the banquet is a 3-day event. Nothing is said about David's absence on day 1. Day 2, King Saul wants to know, where is he? And Jonathan gives that prearranged explanation as to where he's gone. Verses 30 to 33, again, if you're skimming down through there, King Saul is indeed irate because this was going to be the opportunity to kill David. And so he's irate concerning the fact that he is not there. Verse 34, "Then Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and did not eat food on the 2nd day of the new moon, for he was grieved over David, because his father had dishonored him." So again, this great friend is greatly distressed because his dad is intent on killing him. Verses 35 to 39. Indeed, that prearranged sign with the arrows. Jonathan indicates to David, "My dad indeed wants to kill you." The last 2 verses, 41 and 42. "When the lad was gone, David rose from the south side and fell on his face to the ground, bowed 3 times, and they kissed each other and wept together. But David wept the more. Jonathan said to David, "Go in safety, inasmuch as we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord will be between me and you, between my descendants and your descendants forever.' Then he arose and departed, while Jonathan went into the city." Again, Saul is on a rampage. He wants to kill David. Jonathan, Saul's son, who is heir to the throne, remains absolutely faithful to his friend David in spite of those circumstances. Again, there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Jonathan certainly is that friend to David. Proverbs 20, verse 6 says, "Many a man proclaims his own loyalty, but who can find a trustworthy man?" David found that with Jonathan and vice versa. True friends, as true of friends as there can be. But we might ask that question that the writer of the Proverbs raises: who can find a trustworthy friend? So let's think about our friends for a few moments, the friendships that we have. Some of our friendships may be relatively new. Some of our friendships have been over years and decades. But you know, one thing about our friends, whether they're new friends or not so new friends, probably at least once we can say that our friend or friends have failed us in some way, right? Because we're imperfect humans. We have also failed our friends as well. So there might be good friendships that we have, but they are not perfect friendships. A true friendship, as we lift that out of these verses today, a true friendship is characterized by David and Jonathan. As we noted, theirs was a covenant friendship. When I think of covenant, this is something comparable to marriage. Many of us have said these words: for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. That's a covenant before God and these witnesses. We have made that covenant promise to our spouse. In essence, that kind of covenant that David and Jonathan had. They were sworn to the best good of one another. Again, a great friendship. Not to belittle the illustration we're looking at here, but I just had to bring this in. In one of the Star Trek movies of the past, some of you are going to right away pick up on this. There's this episode where the character Spock is about to die. Tugs at your heartstrings. He's about to die, and he has these famous last words to his good friend, Captain Kirk, in which he says, "I have been and always shall be your friend." That sounds like a covenant type of a friendship. I have been your friend. I always shall be your friend. Back in the 90s, Michael W. Smith used to sing this song, and probably a lot of us did, and friends are friends forever, if the Lord's the Lord of them, and a friend will not say never. Don't break out in song, just listen to the words. Because the welcome will not end, a lifetime's not too long to live as friends. We are enriched by friendships. My life has been very positively impacted by good friends. I think about college friends, Bible college friends, friends for life. You may spend 4 years together, but these are some of the best friends you're ever going to have, committed to the same lifestyle, committed to the same ethic of service. Good friends. I think about friends in this room, maybe friends that are watching by way of the internet. Some friends who've been friends for at least 40 years. Yeah. I think about friends in previous pastorates that I've met with for prayer, Bible study, very personal heart sharing. Friends in this room. Some of us who've been friends for 15 years, others maybe not quite so long. Good friends. My best mortal friend of all is my wife. So thankful for that friendship. With friends, it's said that with good friends, you pick up right where you left off, even if you haven't seen each other for years. And I think that's so, isn't it? That's the way friendship works. Friends are those that you can count on to listen to you, to really listen without qualifying what they're hearing, but to listen objectively. Good friends give good advice. You can count on what it is that they will advise you to do. Friends that will do whatever they can do to help without a sense that it is an imposition to do something for you, that's a good friend. There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. An old hymn says, "I have found a friend in Jesus. He's everything to me. He's the fairest of 10,000, to my soul the lily of the valley. In him alone I see all I need to cleanse and make me fully whole. In sorrow he's my comfort, in trouble he's my stay. He tells me every care on him to roll. There's another songwriter that got it in terms of friendship with Jesus. Turn over with me to John chapter 15. If we're talking friendship, we've got to look here. 2 verses, John 15, verses 14 and 15. The words of Jesus, our best friend. When he says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." Real friendship is more than sentimental feelings and kind words. Real friendship is active action for their benefit. Jesus says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you." What he commands us is not burdensome, but we're friends not just because we say we are friends, but we are the friends of Jesus if we practice that which he teaches us. And as he says, we have an open friendship. No secrets. Jesus, he says, and I believe he means that exactly in verse 15, he discloses to us everything that his Father has revealed to him. It would be easy to think that God has given some inside information to Jesus, and let's just guard that, you and I. According to verse 15, if I understand that correctly, every single thing that God revealed to Jesus, he says, I reveal that to you, my children, my followers. Now that's a pretty amazing friendship, that we know all of God's secrets. True friendship, as we've been noting, as we especially looked at David and Jonathan, true friendship seeks the greatest good for the other. It also says in verse 13, if you're still turned to John 15, when Jesus says, "Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends." So we know based on that we truly have no greater friend than Jesus, because he has done that very thing for us. He's laid his life down for us, and he's entered into a covenant friendship with us. I think also of his words at the Last Supper, Luke 22, verse 20, when it says he took the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." So we're blood brothers in terms of our friendship with Jesus. I think sometimes kids that form clubs and they decide they want to be blood brothers, and they may jab their finger and let their blood mingle together. Jesus has poured out his blood for us, so we truly have a covenant friendship for him and with him, for better or for worse, whatever it is that may come. The covenant agreement through his blood remains forever, absolutely. So again, he is the truest friend you will ever have. Someone says that a friend will strengthen you with his prayers, bless you with his love, and encourage you with his hope. A loyal friend is someone who sticks up for you even when you're not there. A man can have no better epitaph than that which is inscribed in the hearts of his friends. Jesus is that kind of friend. He strengthens us, first of all, with his prayers. He's doing that right now. Hebrews 7:25 says that he always lives to make intercession for them, for us. What's he been doing for the last 2,000 plus years at the right hand of God? He is always interceding for his friends, for those of us who belong to him. He also, as our best friend, blesses us with his love. He said, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love." John 15, verse 9. Indeed, he blesses us with his love. He encourages us with his hope. As Colossians 1:27 says, "Christ in you, the hope of glory." That's what our best friend does for us. He gives us the hope of the glory to be received in resurrection at the return of Christ. You might have heard this message from several years ago entitled, "That's My King" by S.M. Lockridge. I just got to share some of it with you this morning. He said, He's the King of glory. He's the King of kings. And He's the Lord of lords. That's my King. I wonder, do you know Him? He supplies strength for the weak. He's available for the tempted and the tried. He sympathizes and He saves. He strengthens and sustains. He guards and He guides. He heals the sick. He cleansed the lepers. He forgives sinners. He discharges debtors. He delivers the captive. He defends the feeble. He blesses the young. He serves the unfortunate. He regards the aged. He rewards the diligent. I wonder if you know Him. I wonder that. I wonder if you know Him. I hope that you do. Because there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. That friend is our Lord Jesus Christ. And I do pray that you know Him as your best friend and Savior. Because if you don't, we need to talk about it, because there's nothing I enjoy more than talking about my best friend. I'd love to have that conversation. Amen.